His commentary and analysis is among the best, bar none. His words serve as a masterclass. He deconstructs the deceptions of the PSYOP war. He is the author of The Greatness Awaits You, the national leader of Australia One Party Incorporated, a monthly panel participant in JMC's Global Defense War, in a league of his own, an international treasure, a follower of Jesus Christ. He is Ricardo Bossi. Ricardo Bossi is a published author and speaker, international business consultant, Eastern Standard Time, right here at jmcbroadcasting.com. Standard Time, right here at jmcbroadcasting.com.
March 18th, 2026. Welcome back. We are live. Welcome back to the Global Financial Reset weekly broadcast, Surviving and Thriving the Transition. I'm John Michael Chambers, and joining me today are my returning guests, attorney Benjamin Hart, live from Bangkok, Thailand, Will Barney, and Bill Armour. All right, before we begin, joining us next week is Patriot Street Fighter Scott McKay and Brandon Clark right here live on the Global Financial Reset, so be sure to tune in next week. And also, we have an announcement. Derek Johnson is available for 1 hour with me as your host live in our private room to answer your questions. This is the all-new Patriot Q&A hour. Mark your calendars, Thursday, March 26th, 8 p.m. Eastern. Derek Johnson. Visit jmcbroadcasting.com and learn about how to access this monthly event. Each month, we have a different power guest to answer your questions. No speeches, no shows, no scripts, no agendas. There for your value to get your questions answered. So please mark your calendars and join us. All right, I'd like to talk about this book I published, Global Financial Reset. This is available on Amazon.com. It's now 5-star rated, and it covers a lot of material. I'll go over it very briefly here. First off, it lays the groundwork of what we're resetting. And it covers basically the GOOTS model, get out of the system, which you can learn also about by visiting wealthcoachuniversity.com. There are 10 free modules there, and the book was derived from the content that I created within those modules. So pick up a copy of Global Financial Reset. Let's talk about Israel. It begins and ends with Israel. We are living in extraordinary times, and many might not realize that these events are deeply rooted in biblical prophecy. Everything begins and ends with Israel. The new system versus the old legacy system. Let's discuss that. The new system is ready to go, but we can't move forward without dismantling the old legacy system first. This old system, built on centralized control and manipulation, is on the brink of collapse. So let's discuss this chain reaction that is taking place. Political and economic turmoil. We see this. Conflicts in the Middle East often lead to widespread instability, affecting global markets and political alliances. The collapse of the centralized system is what's taking place. The legacy system, built on centralized banking and political control, will start to crumble as its core, Israel's influence, is disrupted. There is a ripple effect. This turmoil will create a ripple effect across the globe. We see it beginning, affecting financial markets, governments, and everyday lives. The collapse will pave the way for decentralized systems and new technologies such as blockchain, QFS, and cryptocurrencies to take center stage. Why Israel? Israel plays a crucial role as the epicenter of global influence. Known as the Rothschilds' banking headquarters, Israel has significant sway over the British Empire. In turn, the British Empire controls the Federal Reserve, Washington, D.C., and other major financial institutions worldwide. There is a biblical connection here. So these events echo biblical prophecies where Israel is often depicted as the center of major global shifts. In times of great change, Israel's role is pivotal, making the beginning and end of significant eras, ERAS. All right, so let's understand these times to truly grasp the magnitude of what is unfolding. It is essential to recognize these signs and understand their implications. The dismantling of the old system isn't just a political or economic shift, it's a transformation of global proportions rooted in ancient prophecies and leading us into a new era, and it is biblical. Now, those that understand and follow the work of Joe M. on X, he's published this. Those who remained asleep till now can no longer slumber. Events will unfold that won't allow it. Be a light for others. Don't say, I told you so, or glad you're awake now. Don't say there is chaos in the world. Say the world is being reborn. All right. Thank you, Joe M. And now we've got Benjamin Hart joining us live from Bangkok, Thailand. Benjamin Hart is an American attorney and naturalized Thai citizen. He immigrated to Thailand nearly 20 years ago and has lived and worked there ever since. He founded the law firm of Integrity Legal. He hails from Kansas, where he worked in the casino industry while attending law school before moving abroad and making his way into Southeast Asia. I am, for disclosure here, I am a client of Integrity Legal. I've used the services over many years in many areas. Thank you, Benjamin Hart, for taking time out of your schedule this morning in Bangkok and joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. You know, we're here, of course, as you know, I'm your neighbor in Chiang Mai here in Thailand. Operation Epic Fury has temporarily impacted the price of oil and gas and goods in general, albeit temporary. And that is, in my opinion, a small price to pay in exchange for what the operation has accomplished now and over time. But Thailand, as I understand, has now less than 2 months of oil reserves. How is the Thai government addressing this? And is that an accurate statement?
It's my understanding, at least what I read yesterday, as of in the Bangkok Post, they at least they're announcing they have 100 days at the moment. Now they've already begun capping gas purchases, what we would call gasoline purchases at various gas stations in Thailand. There is something of an issue with certain lines in certain places. There's, there's not the abundance of the product that we would have under normal circumstances. That it's not quite, to paraphrase the movie Ghostbusters, it's not yet dogs and cats living together masses. Yeah, it's already having an impact here, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't drive in the country, but I've picked up some of the news feeds on that. Thailand also relies, as you well know, to a large degree on tourism. I think we're in the heart of our season, right? And I believe that's been a big impact here. Talk with us about the economic impact on Thailand concerning tourism. What's happening with that affecting us here at home?
Okay, so Thailand's actually going through a bit of a transition. A lot of foreigners make in my opinion, a bigger deal of the Thailand tourism sector than maybe they should. So we got a very good glimpse of what Thailand's economy looks like effectively without tourism. I remember actually making a video. I think I would have put it up around about January of 2021, right in the deep, crazy COVID. And we literally saw the tourism sector, and I mean literally decimated. I made a video on it at the time because that was the numbers. It made up, prior to, call it Q1 of 2020, tourism made up about 18% of Thailand's overall economy. After a year of COVID, it was 1.8% of Thailand's overall economy. I mean, it literally knocked it down to a tenth of what it had been. Bring this up is Thailand's economy is far more broadly robust than a lot of outsiders give it credit for. For example, the automotive industry, just to name one, is a thriving, and it's industrial. We're talking about, actual industrial production type of jobs, type of economic activity that otherwise exists in Thailand. So Thailand gets this weird reputation where outsiders want to treat it like almost like a Caribbean island or something that if it didn't have tourism, all would just dry up and die. It's not great to tourism in Thailand. I've lived through that period and I've seen what it does to the economy. It's good to have foreign cash slosh, excuse me, foreign cash sloshing around Thailand's economy. That there, it's good times when we have that. And frankly, Thai season is probably one of the best we've had in maybe over a decade, and that includes the times before COVID. I mean, this was a very good high season, but the tourism is changing here. We're seeing people more and more that are coming in that once would have been here a few months and then they would have left, and they're finding different visa options and they're finding different ways to live here. And frankly, I think a number of people are starting to find Thailand to be something of a haven amidst all of these things around the world. In a weird way, not I'm not completely pessimistic about what's going on. Now, it's going to have an impact. We're already seeing jet fuel prices and things of this nature going up. So, going into this summer and things, I could see it being a low season than what we're used to, but we're right here at the end of traditional high season. It always goes quite quiet during the month of March. And then we sort of get a resurgence in April for the Thai New Year. And then in May, we'll go into the probable doldrums with regard to tourists, but that's pretty standard. My big question is, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to energy. Supposedly, Thailand's been talking to Russia and they're making some kind of deal there. Against to be seen how that fully bears out. But overall, with the tourism thing, I think there's two things going on: the overarching issues associated with Iran, sure, and then also Thailand was already on a path to sort of changing the way tourism operates within their economy, and that can kind of be looked at because it's not just all based on tourism out here, and the way people are tourists, I think, is going to change fundamentally moving forward.
Do you care to comment on in which ways that those changes you're perceiving may be?
Well, yeah, people, the world's changing. Since COVID and the notion of remote work, people don't travel with the same intentions that they once did. It's a very different paradigm. People are
Mhm.
more open to the prospect of coming out to a place like this, and it's both from my standpoint, a guy that basically jumped off a cliff to see if he could fly by going to Asia. Kind of heartening to me that it shows a kind of level of rugged individualism from the Westerners. But yeah, they call them nomads. I don't love that
Yes, you
terminology,
do.
but we do see a lot of people who are much more mobile and they're able to
Mhm.
move out here and be here for a while. It's not a matter of people coming out here for 2 weeks and staying at a resort and going home. We're getting more and more people that want to be out here for months or years. Would I call these folks expats in the sense that we would call them that in the past? No, they're a little different. They're not as, but they're not as touristy, for lack of a better word, as we saw in the past.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good observation, and I understand that. I've been here 3 years straight and back and forth to Thailand since, I guess 2012 or 13. Speaking about the issues of epic fury and the impact in Thailand, I was reading a report from one of the Bangkok related news feeds on social media where I came across something that said half of Thailand's fishing fleet, or about 9,000 vessels, were expected to, or perhaps are, being held in ports due to a shortage of diesel and anticipated fuel prices increasing, as you just alluded to. Do you know anything about that? Has that happened? I know fishing is part of the local economy, and if 9,000 vessels are being held at, from their work, that's got to have an impact. Is that accurate?
I I think it's early days to try to ascertain exactly how this is going to play out in this economy. Yes, I read that same report. I've heard that.
Mhm.
That said, it sounded to me like something that was anecdotally occurring, but they're like ascribing a kind of broad situation. Look, obviously, even a bot differential in the price of, for example, diesel will have a tremendous impact on, it's all based on energy, and energy is a
Mhm.
component in all of these supply chains, be it fishing, ever. Yes, it's going to have an impact. Do I think that we're going to see 9,000 fishing ships, be just decommissioned overnight? Not really. I think what'll happen is the market will, excuse me, sort of find its own equilibrium as the fishing stocks increase as a result of there not being as many fishermen out there. There will be, it's sort of like that movie Forrest Gump, where he goes through the hurricane and then he ends up being the only fishing boat. Similar circumstances here. I could see where, you're going to end up with people that become hyper specialized at fishing because they've got to make up for that. They've got to be able to get themselves more efficient in order to make up for that cost input coming from. So I think that's just one aspect of what's going on here. My personal opinion is long term, Thailand will figure this out. I mean, again, they've already been talking to Russia about getting oil down here. Now, folks will say, well, how are they going to work that out? Well, Thailand's been sucking up rubles like a Hoover for a couple of multiple years now. And, everybody says and notes that we have a number of Russian tourists that come through here all the time. We have a number of Russians that come down here on charter flights that stay for a long period of time. We've got an influx also want to come down here to live. They got to bring in their capital, and then that capital has to be turned around and done something with. All of those rubles coming in, it seems logical to me that the Thailand will probably use them to go buy oil off Russia and continue the feedback loop. And if not Russia, they will find another supplier. I mean, Thailand's very good at being friends with everyone. So, they have issues from time to time, especially those who recall the border incidents of this past summer. But overall, Thailand's greatest strength is being sort of just a kind of a friend and trading partner with anybody, and kind of wants to be left alone otherwise to deal with its own internal stuff.
Yeah. Uh, I don't not on the pulse of the statistics, but I know there's quite a few Russians in Phuket and certain areas here in Thailand. I want to ask you about the tourists that are here. Uh, in the beginning of Epic Fury, I don't know where it stands now. I'm looking for an update from you if you know. But a lot of the tourists that were here needed their visas extended because they couldn't leave the country due to transfer
Mhm.
flights that were disruptive because of the bombs and so forth and so on. How, where does that stand, and how did the Thai government address that? And I know you do a lot of immigration work, so what's happening with that presently?
Okay, so basically what happened was the this looks a lot like the COVID response, but it's quickly and efficiently. So, and I don't mean to drag us back to COVID, but very quickly, back in COVID, when they instituted the emergency decree March 2020, there's like a 6 month period in there, extremely difficult to get into Thailand, but it was possible, which unlike other countries, Thailand did stay open overall. The But it took them like 6 months to come up with basically what they've done instantaneously in the aftermath of Epic Fury going down, and then all these folks not being able to get back to their long story short, Thailand immediately announced, hey, we're waiving any overstays or fines or anything. They all said on an ad hoc basis they would do visa extensions. There is an embassy certification process that one needs to undertake. They basically got to go to their embassy, ask for a letter that says, hey, this person can't get home, or it's not a good idea for them to go home. Can you accommodate? And then on a state to state level, basically Thailand will accommodate those folks and let them stay. They've announced initially they said there'd be a 2,000 baht per stranded person stipend. That
Mhm.
evolved. I made the videos on that in real. That evolved to basically it's a subsidy for the hotels that are accommodating these folks. So if you're stuck here and you're in your hotel and they say, hey, it's time to go, it's possible for that hotel to go ahead and contact the Thai government and receive, a subsidy in order to keep people in those hotels. It's an ad hoc sort of bandage response, but it seems to be working. Now, on top of that, I just read an article yesterday. I think the video has gone up within the last 24 hours, where they have moved 40,000 stranded tourists along, and Thailand has been
Wow.
used also as an entrepot, as basically a middleman country to move other folks from other parts of the world. One of the big things we're seeing happening here is, for lack of a better word, in the same sense of the word, the sea lanes, the air lanes of world travel are shifting now. So people are coming through. I've talked to a number of people that have had to sort of reorient themselves travel wise and are using Thailand, South Korea, for example, as places where they can, okay, once I can get to Seoul, once I can get to Bangkok, then I can get on a plane and get back home,
Right.
but not via the Middle East. Now, whatever that means, depending on the individual, that what country they're trying to get to, where they're coming from, that's going to dictate how they get there. But both places. I actually I've joked around a little bit about this on Twitter. I took a scene from the opening scene of the movie Casablanca, globe, and like all the people moving around to the different places to get where they need to go. And I noted, I mean, in many ways, I think Bangkok kind of looks like Casablanca at the moment, in the sense that it's where folks who are otherwise sort of, I hesitate to say displaced from, but temporarily displaced from, can at least get to, because they know, well, it's open enough. Visas aren't insane. You can get access to the place. They're accommodating enough, again, within reason, and it can be used as an entrepot to move on. So in many ways, this could end up having an economic impact on Thailand long term, but it's one that she's
Mm.
going to have to adapt quickly to the prevailing circumstances to be able to benefit from.
So, and thank you, Ben. Very, very insightful and important for me. I reside in Thailand, and it's also interesting for our audience to see sort of a boots on the ground reporting, if you will, of the impact of Epic Fury in this particular region. And I'm sure there are stories to be told in other regions and other countries within this region. But in conclusion, Ben, um, so off the coattails of what you just said, would you, the impact of this is not going to come anything close to the impact of COVID, let's say, on Thailand. It won't be that long standing and that disruptive, right? I mean, what's your take on that?
I okay, I've said this before and I'll say it again. It doesn't change this hypothesis. Thailand, in one, we actually have prime ministerial election is going to be occurring in parliament. The Speaker of the House has been confirmed. We now have an open parliament. It's a pretty big deal. In the past year, Thailand has been able to put a lot of political baggage and cleavage behind her. And moving forward, we're moving into a very different place in terms of the internal political dynamic within Thailand. So that's very to understand. Thailand
Mm.
is internally more unified and stronger than maybe she's been in 15 years, and maybe the entire
Mm.
time I've been
Mm.
here. We're in very, very interesting times in terms, and in a positive way, for Thailand. I've never been more
Yeah.
optimistic about the future of Thailand politically and economically. So from that standpoint, that needs to be understood internally. In terms of her external position, in terms of foreign affairs, in terms of the geopolitical position, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Thailand operates as the spoke, if you will, within the wheel that is Southeast Asia, or what's called ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And when things are sort of firing on all cylinders from Thailand, it's sort of prime mover. And again, you have to understand Southeast Asian economic and political dynamics. It's not a fluid system. It's not even a particularly unified system. They're all different countries. They all have national interests. They all have different priorities. But the geopolitics of land-based Southeast Asia and Thailand's position therein makes a unified Thailand a very potent, I hesitate to use the word force, but a very actor in that geopolitical stage. So that's something to understand. Secondly, with regard to her relationship to the rest of the world, and especially in the very unified state that Thailand finds itself in now, we are seeing a situation where position is as if she was in the middle of a kaleidoscope and the world is sort of spinning around her. This epic fury situation, this situation in the Middle East, and tremendous impact. But again, I reiterate, Thailand just pivots. She's just going to start looking for alternatives. If there's oil that could come out of Timbuktu, she'd make a deal with, the Nepalese, and they'd start figuring out a way to get oil down here. Same thing goes again. Folks can have whatever thoughts they want about the Russians vis-a-vis Thailand. There's old relations between the two countries. There's in very specific and individualized ways as well as geopolitically. Our alliance with the Americans, or the Thai-American alliance, are, from my perspective, from both sides of that equation, it has never actually been stronger either. I think having Cobra Gold at the moment, and that exercise goes back decades, and it's another example of the very special relationship between Thailand and the United States. I'm sure you're aware Thailand is actually America's oldest ally in East Asia, uninterrupted. So we've got a good relationship there. Long story short, Thailand's just going to, operate the way she always has, stay friends with everybody, look to the national interest. And the national interest says right now she needs to diversify where her oil comes from. And I expect she's doing that in earnest as we speak.
Yep. Well, I think those are great points and a good depiction of Thailand's position over the couple of thousand years of their history. Well, listen, Ben, thank you very much for weighing in on what's happening here in Thailand. And while we don't have a large audience in this region, we do have a growing audience here. Share with us as we close out your segment, what you focus on at Integrity Legal, how people can follow your work. And I will say this, Benjamin puts out some great videos. I think they're pretty much daily, and they're short and sweet, pertaining to Thailand-related matters. But paint a picture for our viewers of what your firm does and how people can follow your work.
Best way to follow us is Integrity Legal Thailand on YouTube, or you can go to the websites legal.co.th or integrity-legal.com. So that's probably the best way to find us. As far as what we do at the firm, I mean, my specialty in many ways really is Thailand for expats. I mean, that's really what I have. That's how I came up out here. Setting up companies for foreigners that want to do business here, assisting them in getting visas just to stay here. And I've been doing U.S. immigration for almost 20 years. Well, actually, as of now, 2026, this will be my 20th year practicing. And primarily I've been doing U.S. immigration that entire time. So we also assist in getting folks' loved ones and folks themselves over to the USA if and when necessary. So yeah, pretty much if you're a foreigner that's looking to come into Thailand, our specialty is helping those folks get in here.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. I've been working with your firm and yourself over the years in that capacity, as well as other things that expats, if you want to put me in that category, other needs we have while being here, and you've been instrumental and very helpful. In fact, I'll be in your office in May for my annual visa renewal, and appreciate your time this morning, weighing in from
Oh yeah.
Bangkok, Thailand. Benjamin Hart, thank you, sir. And I'd like to put a
Thank you
disclaimer
very much.
here
Thanks for the
before we.
opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. The information provided by me and my guests is for educational purposes only and is not to be considered as specific investment, tax, nor legal advice. You are encouraged to do your own research and consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals. All right, having said that, Will Barney brings over 19 years of experience in the banking sector, where he has developed a strong specialization in structuring funding for commercial projects on a global scale. We'll talk about that in a moment, and humanitarian projects and so forth. You can learn more about Will by visiting jmcbroadcasting.com. Contributors up on top. You click on that tab, scroll down, you'll see Will's bio and a link to his world, enochgs.com. Let's see. One moment here. I've got some technical issues. Anyway, welcome, Will Barney.
Hi, John. How
Thanks
are
for
you?
being
Good
here.
to be with you.
Thank
Yeah,
you
it's good
for
to join you
sitting
once again.
and waiting. Thanks for being here. One moment. I'm taking a look at a structure. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. Sorry, folks. Okay, folks, I have a teleprompter in front of me. Of course, no one writes my talking points. I do, but it keeps me focused. And apparently, I had a little glitch here. But anyway, we're on track now. Thank you for being here, Will. With all the new people following JMC Broadcasting, coupled with the fact that I'd like to keep, there's two things. We have our returning audience, and we have a lot of new folks coming in. With that in mind, take a few minutes before I pick your brain, if you will, on the issues of the day. Take a few minutes speaking to the new folks, and a reminder for those that have been following us weekly. What is Enoch Global Services? What are you doing there? What's the mission? And any particular updates you have for those that are aware of your work.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, John. So what we do here at Enoch Global Services, we're all about helping humanitarian projects become realized and actually get to their conclusion. We know projects are important in terms of how they impact people's lives, but they're only important if they get done. So we're building out an apparatus, software and hardware infrastructure to allow the launching and management of thousands of projects per year. And we're also building out various assistive services that help each of these projects kind of get to where they need to go. So whether somebody has, project outline or maybe some idea that they want to do, but they're not sure how to get this into project form, then our company is one that could help you, walk you through the process, get you into a business plan format, get you ready for funding so you can actually be making a difference in the area which you're in. We're starting in the United States, but we do intend to move throughout the world and to get to many countries very quickly once the conclusion of the development side of the software is concluded. So it's been exciting. It's been quite a journey that we've been on, and we're happy to be here and be of service to others.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and continued success on that development. It's a huge global effort, and I think it's going to be very productive for people not only in America but all over the world. All right, I'd like to talk about the Clarity Act for a moment. Where in the process is this Clarity Act at, in terms of it being passed into law, and what are the key takeaways and importance of this bill?
Well, the Clarity Act is a very important piece of legislation. We're talking about creating a legal and lawful framework and regulation around blockchain that is very similar to the protections that consumers would enjoy today with their banking. So when we look at blockchain, which is a digital decentralized ledger, we're talking about bringing those same protections for everybody there now. We don't have that currently. Blockchain's been very much kind of a bit of a Wild West in many countries. There are some countries that are getting on the regulatory framework more quickly than the United States. But this has been ongoing here for some time. The House of Representatives passed this bill back in July of 2025, and it's been sitting in the Senate waiting to be passed the Senate so it can go to the president for signature. What's interesting is that this lawful framework and regulatory framework that's coming to the system is not something the banks want to see. So right now we have some real pushback with a lot of banking people that are using their influence on Congress to try to say, we don't like this, we don't like that, because this becomes, the moment this is passed, you see blockchain becoming really a clear alternative to the existing banking system. It's been around for 100 plus years. So you can imagine they don't want to see this, their cash cow go away. So there is some pushback that's been going on. Some of it's been from the blockchain community itself, as we've seen a couple of the companies that are involved in exchanges are not real happy with some of the language in there because it actually holds their feet to the fire. They have to become very compliant. So some of them are not happy with that, but more so, banks are not happy because the moment this gets passed, we now all have alternatives to send stable coins or other type of currency directly to one another and bypass the banks altogether. So the banks aren't real happy about this, but I don't see that there's any way it can be stopped. There seems to be plenty of, shall we say, bipartisan support from both sides of the political spectrum to get this done. Both Democrat and Republican leaders understand that their constituents won't be happy with them if they don't get this across the finish line. That being said, I think we're still looking at a few more weeks. We could be another month, perhaps, trying to get this processed and get it out the door. So from what I understand at this point, and my sources are telling me, we could be looking at a mid-April or to even latter part of April timeline to finally get this bill passed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important bill in order for us to continue on the trajectory that we're on in the parallel systems and economies that we're building. So that's really important. And a lot of things seem to be sitting in the Senate. We have the SAVE Act over there as well, but we'll take on that at another time. I'd like to talk about BlackRock for a moment. Was a move made last year? I got a few questions. Was a move made last year that involves some sort of degree of our, administration, the government, in some sort of, I don't want to say takeover, but some unity between the U.S. government and BlackRock? Do you know anything about that?
Well, it's not been overtly announced in any degree, but what we have seen is we've seen BlackRock behaving in a way that seems to be cooperating more with the government, more so than we've seen previously. And that is something interesting to watch. If you remember, many of you in your audience understand this, but there's a series of executive orders that were issued that anybody involved in human trafficking and other such debauchery, they could have their assets seized, and those assets would then be used by the government for other purposes because of the crimes of which they've committed. Now, I'm not saying BlackRock is in this camp necessarily. However, it's one of the largest companies in the U.S. It has had massive control over the markets, and it has predominantly got into that position because of huge support by the cabal itself. So you can imagine that there could be individuals tied to that could fall into that category of perhaps needing to be removed from society, and that those assets could be frozen. If that were to occur, that would be very monumental, because there's massive assets in a company of that size that could be used for good. So as we watch BlackRock, the most interesting thing to watch is the relationship that we're seeing back and forth between government leaders and with BlackRock itself, that typically we wouldn't have seen or didn't see in the past. that seems to be a more cooperative arrangement, that gives us some indicators that there could have been some moves made in that regard.
I think you, I say this with all due respect, tiptoed around that very brilliantly. And I think that our audience has a lot of food for thought there based on the question that I asked. And thank you for the response. While we're on the subject of BlackRock, I understand they recently limited withdrawals amid concerns over a $2 trillion private credit market situation that's happening out there. Would you concur? What are your comments about that? These are some big numbers.
Yes, there's some, well, it's very big numbers because they deal in the big numbers. But ultimately, the challenge is you have some investors in BlackRock that are pulling back, saying, this market isn't looking too good for me, and I want to pull some of my money back because I want to put it into protect mode. And they weren't allowing this to occur. So they were putting holds on the withdrawals,
Mhm.
which only caused more panic. And
Yeah.
this is
Mhm.
partly fueled by the issue of the pending bond crisis that we have. You've talked about it numerous times on your program, and so have many of your guests. There's a major problem with massive debts that have been built up,
Yes.
municipal bonds, particularly in the municipal bond category, where you've had a variety of cities, states, and even county corporations that have amassed a great amount of debt. Oftentimes, they'll use things like the school system or the children as reasons why they need to borrow this money, etc. And then they borrow vast sums of money, and then it's not really going to the children, it's going to whatever they're spending it on. And then they find themselves in a problem when they can't pay this back. And so now
Mhm.
we're having a major issue right now where you have states like Florida, states like Texas that are moving forward with legislation to perhaps end property tax in their state.
Yeah.
And this is a very interesting phenomenon because everybody's seen that property tax as being the main source of revenue that's been used to
Mhm.
pay these bonds. Okay.
Wow.
If that revenue goes away, what happens
Mhm.
with the capacity to pay these bond payments? And were these
Wow.
loans even needed in the first place? There's going to be a lot of scrutiny that's about to come down on top of county commissioners and on top of even state leaders as we start looking at this massive amount of debt. Multiple states have debt in the tens of billions. California has more debt than some entire countries.
Wow.
So you can imagine there's going to be some real scrutiny in many of these states. The fraud exposure has only begun. Just this week, President Trump signed a couple of executive orders in this regard, making everything formalized, with the vice president being made, the press affectionately called him the fraud czar. I guess I
Yes.
don't think that's an official term, but he didn't seem to shy away from it whatsoever. And he's putting together an entire team of people to start looking into the fraud in each one of these individual states with when regards to federal funds. We can do that on a federal basis with this presidency, but it's up to each individual state to start looking at the fraud
Mhm.
within their own state and counties to do it on a local
Mhm.
level. And I don't see us having a great and glorious future without cleaning out the henhouse. And so I think we're going to see more effort put in this into this over the past 3 weeks. Let's call it a month. There have been tens of billions of dollars that have already been exposed as being fraudulent payments in just the Medicare and Medicaid system into various states. We thought Minnesota was really bad. California's even worse. We haven't even looked at Illinois and New York yet. That's just beginning. New York was given a notice by Dr. Oz, who's over the Medicare, Medicaid, to come up with a plan. He's given New York 30 days to come up with a plan of how they're going to root out the fraud in the system in their state. So we'll see what New York comes up with. But within the next 30 days, they might start taking action. And those actions could be areas where they immediately identify fraud and simply start cutting off payments. So I share all of that because it ties in with this bigger picture of the bond crisis that's looming. You can't have mountains and mountains of debt out there and there not be some way to solve the debt crisis. The problem with many of these debts is these debts aren't owned by the Federal Reserve or some other big entity like that. There's individuals, there's corporations, there's all kinds of people that invested in these municipal bonds. So the fact that these could potentially begin to default is going to put some major stress upon the financial system in general.
Great information and analysis, and it brings to my mind a few things. One, you talked about the impact on corporations and individuals concerning the bond issue. One wonders about the pensions. Any comment about that? A lot of pensions are by model design required to hold X amount of bonds, and some of those are undoubtedly municipal bonds for the perceived safety. That's only a perception now. Any concerns you may have regarding that?
Well, everyone always considered that there would always be endless amount of funds, that if a state couldn't handle a bill, they could borrow it from the federal government and this was a foregone conclusion. So pension funds and insurance companies and others look for long-term investments that are just steady, but particularly the pension funds do. And these have been a place of steady income for them over the long haul. However, you're going to see this dramatically change as we begin to look at, as more fraud is exposed, you're going to see the anxiety level start rising among many of these in the pension fund department, because they're going to be concerned about their exposure. Now they have a whole portfolio, so they're not all in one category, but nevertheless, any losses really cut into the basis of their ability to pay out their retirement funds. So obviously this is something that can't be ignored. I don't think anybody is saying this is just something that's going to pass over. And it's probably very much a key point of any society that is looking at a change of financial systems. Whether you go back in history and you look at the fall of Rome or whatnot, when the system is collapsing and it starts to come down, it's not pretty. It's disruptive. It's painful. Very. I think that what we're looking at with the Trump administration is they seem to be making efforts to try to mitigate the recovery process by juicing the entire economy up to a high enough level that at least we recover quickly. But I don't think that necessarily removes the issue and the risk of what's in front of us with the failing old system.
You've just walked us through in the last several minutes. What the vision that I see is a little snowball that's been made, actually a big snowball, and it's being put on the top of that 14,000 foot mountain, and it's starting to go down and becoming this massive event. And I think that's unfortunately where we stand. Jamie Dimon of Chase is greatly concerned about the bond debacle, the credit debt issue globally, and has stated, I'm paraphrasing, something in the tune of this will be perhaps one of the worst corrections we've ever seen. On the heels of Jamie Dimon,
it does surpass that.
Yes.
Well, I was looking at reports just yesterday indicating that defaults on private debt is at levels that have eclipsed 2008, 2009 already.
Wow. I guess
so. It's just beginning, folks. It's going to be huge.
All right. Well, brace for impact, folks. We're going to talk about solutions to this escalating crisis and action items in just a moment when we roundtable with Bill Armour and Will Barney, folks. So hang in there. I want to talk about President Trump's lawsuit against Jamie Dimon's Chase. Do you know anything about that? What's the premise of the lawsuit, the amount, the likelihood of it, and so forth?
You have to understand the magnitude of what was behind this. When Chase debanked the Trump administration, they shut down over 300 bank accounts in one day. This was massive in a multi-billion dollar company. Okay. So it wasn't a small thing. I've been debanked by Chase too. But, I consider that just a badge of honor. However, when you look at what Trump is doing, he's going after them and he's going to win because they don't have a reason. They don't have a valid reason why they did this. He's probably going to win the suit. They're going to end up paying the billions of dollars or whatever the court decides is going to be paid there. But you have this, all of this is coming to light and getting attention that it should have had years ago. We bank with another bank that was actually started by a group of patriots that were all debanked for saying what they thought about COVID. As if their opinions, had some criteria as to whether they should have a bank account or not. And so a group of them got together and they formed a bank that says, we're going to form a bank that can't cancel anybody, depending on what you want to say. Say whatever you want to say. You have freedom of speech. So that's fantastic. We don't worry about those things anymore, fortunately. Okay. However, these are things that we've come through as we look at all of the debacle that we've had with COVID and everything that went on during that transition. This was an attack upon the freaking world. Okay. It was on everybody. We were all faced with shutting down businesses. We had the entire world closed down, everybody putting on masks. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. Everyone walking around in complete and utter fear. And the amazing thing is, to me, as you look at some of the science of this, is that these viruses are very small in size. And they were asking everybody to use these standard masks to mask up to prevent the spread of virus. But the problem is the virus is so small that it's smaller than the micron particles within the mask. It's kind of like trying to keep mosquitoes out of your yard with a chain link fence. It didn't really work. And we're beginning to find some of this out now as even if you look at the previous big pandemics, like the Spanish flu that happened, 90 years ago. If you look at the Spanish flu, and there's been reports written on this, one of which was co-authored by Anthony Fauci. He talked about that over 50% of the people died from bacteria buildup in their mask rather than from the actual disease itself. So all of these things are now coming out. You have just this week, you have a very big move by Argentina. The United States some time ago made a big announcement. We're out of the World Health Organization. We don't want any part of that anymore. Argentina just announced they're out. They don't want any part of it anymore either. So people are starting to bail off of the ship of these various organizations. It's interesting how these cabal organizations always have three letters, and I think it's their power number. And what they were doing, right? And we're finding out, wait, there was ties between Wuhan and Ukraine. Where was the origination of these viruses? Where was it all started? And so all of this is beginning to come out. And why are we talking about all this? We're talking about all this because the actions taken during that particular pandemic violated everybody's rights across every nation. It doesn't matter what country you lived in, your rights were violated during that time, right? And we had to do this in the name of saving everyone. But ultimately, it didn't really work out that way. And so now we're finding out there's many details that are coming out saying that this looks very different. Now, I'm not saying that vaccines work or don't work. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist to tell you about that aspect of it. I'm just saying the way that we reacted to things violated the rights of individuals. And this is probably an inappropriate thing to do in any free and open society. And so as we look at actions taken by banks, we look at actions taken by medical professionals and even governments, many of these went way beyond the scope of what their country's constitution stated they had the bounds to do. And everybody thought, well, it's just necessary we do this. Obviously, there was a lot of problems during that time. I've lost people. You probably lost people, John. We all know people that have passed away during this entire debacle. I know people that have passed away just waiting for this reset. So this has not been an easy thing for any of us to get through. But I think it's important as we look at our future and we look at going forward that we find ways not to tear each other apart and violate each other, but we find ways to build each other up and to support each other in the expression of our rights and our freedoms, because I think that should be allowed in every country.
Well said. And these rights violations of nearly 8 billion people is going to use the expression "come home to roost" to those that created this mess. And let's put our positive thoughts behind President Trump winning this lawsuit. We'll start there against Chase for overstepping their bounds. And I'll tell you what, Nuremberg 2.0 is coming. I'm certain of that. They're not going to get away with this. And let's get there when we get there. But they will pay the price, Fauci and the rest of them. I don't mind saying that right now. I've been debanked. I've been deplatformed. I was a recipient of the shedding. I was quite ill. I've lost people, as you stated. Everyone has a story to tell, multiple layers of stories to tell of the impact of that mess. But anyway, thanks for tying it in there. We got into COVID as a result of what the banks were doing to you and to the president. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about, do you know anything about Federal Tariff Reserve, the FTR? Have you heard about this?
Federal Tariff Reserve? No, I haven't heard about the Tariff Reserve per se.
Okay. So
I do know we're taking in massive amounts of tariffs, and most of that's going into the Sovereign Wealth Fund, of which the Treasury announced this week they were going to buy back $15 billion worth of debt. In other words, pay off some T-bills and buy that debt back. I find that fascinating as we look at these changes, because they could have applied that money to Federal Reserve debt, but they didn't. They're applying it to all the other debt that's owned by individuals, corporations, and everybody else. So that's the debt they're buying back, and that's the debt they'll probably continue to buy back until we've reached an equilibrium of that debt satisfied. The Federal Reserve debt, I think, is a whole nother matter and is going to be handled perhaps even by a Jubilee, but we'll see how that plays out. But I do think the country's going to honor each of its private debts. And today, or at least yesterday, we saw massive evidence of that they are taking responsibility to do so.
Yeah, it's a great observation that tariff reserve is not going to the Federal Reserve's debt, which, by the way, I checked the debt clock last night, the usadebtclock.org, I think it is, or whatever. We just moved into 39 trillion from 38. It's been in the 38 trillion mark for quite some time. It just ticked up to 39. But again, I agree with you. However it plays out is above my pay grade at this time. But from the 40,000 foot view statement, that the majority of that debt will end up on the Federal Reserve's books versus ours, and that's good news. Last week, we had retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox was on the GFR here, along with Rob Cunningham. We had an explosive episode discussing a lot of different things. But one of the things that Colonel Lennox commented on was the big five, we'll call it, the central banks, B of A, Chase, Wells, et cetera, that they're basically all bankrupt. And in my own words, they're propped up in some sort of a shell game at this time, in layman's terms. Would you concur with that statement and bring some more factual analysis to support it if in fact you feel that these banks are pretty much underwater?
We actually first got this news about 3 or 4 years ago that they were all in trouble. and it was coming out of the COVID era, and that those bankruptcies were all being held hush hush, basically a sealed proceeding, while they restructured things. I find it fascinating because this ties in with current markets right now, particularly if you look at the commodities markets of gold and silver. Over the last couple of weeks, as we were on our way into March, in that last week of February, the COMEX shut down for an hour and a half, and there was all kinds of weird things that happened right during that time. And then when it comes back up, thousands of contracts are no longer there. And suddenly, it looks like we've avoided a big catastrophe in March because we don't have, 200 million ounces standing for delivery. We have a reasonable number. But people need to keep in mind that there's a lot going on with these big banks, and they're tied into these markets in a lot of different ways. Even with what we've seen over the last couple of days, like I'll give it, for instance, for today. Just today, you have JP Morgan Chase standing for delivery of 500,000 ounces from Morgan Stanley. Okay. So they asked for 100 contracts to be honored, and they're standing for delivery. And that took place today. But we've had, during the month of March, we've had over 41 million ounces delivered off the COMEX registry. There was only about close to 80 million going into March that was even available in registered inventory. So now you're looking at half of that is gone in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. What are we going to look like when we get to May, where they kicked all these contracts down the road to? What is that going to look like? And how does that affect these banks? And I want to tie it in with the banks because I think this is very important to understand. I mentioned JP Morgan, but most of these big banks are deeply embedded into the shorts that have been going on with the COMEX registry. And a big company like JP Morgan plays both sides of the game. What I mean by that is they'll have a trading desk that's handling all the paper that's doing these contracts, and they're trading on margin, okay? But then you have a commodity side of the bank that's actually looking for physical delivery. And so you could potentially have on the same given day, one desk doing one thing and another desk doing completely the opposite thing, and you're like, what's going on with this bank? But they're so big that can actually be going on at the same time. So as the trading gets escalated, and you start to see a sell-off like you saw today, because I think silver lost $5 today, that sell-off starts triggering other algorithms, and it increases the sell-off. And then you have the commodity side over here saying, hey, it's a sale. I want 500,000 ounces. Deliver it right now, right? And that's kind of what occurred today. So just because we're seeing prices come down doesn't mean that we're out of the woods, because there's a whole separation going on between physical silver and paper silver. Now, how does this tie in with these banks? What ties in with these banks is they were all running short positions, and they're needing to unload these short positions. And waving in the background of their mind is this whole idea of what happened in early February when the government got together with 54 nations and held a mineral ministerial. And at this mineral ministerial, they discussed putting a price floor on certain minerals to stabilize the market so that we could continue to build out a supply of these minerals. And the top mineral on the list in the U.S. is silver. So they haven't yet enacted the price floor. They've been in discussions for this for over a month now with all these nations, and they're trying to come to a consensus of what that floor is going to be. In the U.S., it might need to be a different number than maybe it is in Chile, okay, or some other country. However, they're trying to come to a number that they think is viable, where mining companies can get back in the business. So all these banks are playing a game right now of trying to unload this massive albatross of exposure of these short positions before this hits. Now, we've already had knowledge that they've been under restructuring bankruptcy for some time. Had that price floor kicked in anytime within the last 2 or 3 weeks, you would have had 4 or 5 massive big banks go out of business in the United States almost overnight, and it would have been absolutely catastrophic for the industry. So there seems to be indications here that the government is putting everybody on notice, is warning everybody ahead of time, and then is allowing them some time to get out of their positions before this goes into effect and holds them by the short and curlies.
Wow. What a set of dynamics at play that you just walked us through. And that leads me to, well, some additional questions. Why don't we bring on our next guest to join in with Will and I? My next guest brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise concerning the economy and precious metals. He's my highly recommended resource for your gold and silver acquisitions inside or outside of your IRA and qualified plans. We talked about pensions and IRAs and such. Bill Armour has built a unique career combining vocational ministry and expertise in the precious metals industry, equipping him to bridge faith-based perspectives with practical wisdom in stewardship and in business. He was originally from Tucson, Arizona. Bill spent 8 years serving in the U.S. Army Reserves. Thereafter, went on to attend Azusa Pacific University, a Christian school in Southern California with a focus on Christian ministry and biblical studies. Welcome back, our good friend Bill Armour.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. Listen, Will Barney, a wealth of knowledge, as you well know, just really unpacked some incredible information about what's been going on in the past few years and in the past few hours concerning the banks and how it's impacting precious metals. Any feedback or contributions to what Will and I just discussed concerning the banks and particularly the floor price of silver? I'm on the record stating, and it's only from talking with folks like you and Will and others, that I came to the conclusion that I thought we'd see silver in this period of time trading at a low of 76 to, in the range of 90, which it's been. What's your take on what Will's been commenting on?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I just want to jump back to that you guys talked on is a little bit about what we've been seeing with BlackRock. And I know someone brought up, potentially, how the U.S. may have intervened there. So I even wanted to address, maybe some of my thoughts on that as well. There was basically a couple of executive orders that were passed that targeted, obviously, on paper at least, corrupt foreign actors, election interference, and some other things. But it may have also created sort of a legal path there in order to freeze, redirect, and quietly influence, define influence maybe, but at least influence infrastructure, financial infrastructure that could be a threat to U.S. sovereignty. So the broader idea there is that firms like BlackRock, because they have so much control, economic control, particularly with things like strategic infrastructure. So that's, it could be influenced by a foreign actor. That's, private asset managers like themselves, but they could influence, systems, personnel, capital management, sovereign debt, defense sectors, critical minerals, for instance. So there was kind of this idea that could be a major issue and a potential weakness for the United States. And, I can't necessarily confirm or deny this, but we can look at some of the data that's come out, since this has happened. But under that framework, obviously, the government would go in and look at these and at least investigate this and steer or maybe not steer, that sort of boat in that way. So I think the legal architecture is definitely there for them to do it. The only question is, did they and to what degree? But I think that even just the way, and Will Barney alluded to this a little bit, the way that they've responded recently would definitely make someone like me think that certainly there's been a little bit of that at play, which is probably a good thing. I mean, I don't think anyone looks at BlackRock and thinks that they have, the United States' best interest at heart. So, they probably do need a little bit of hand holding there. And I don't think it's a crazy thought to think that has occurred to some degree. And then, just kind of right on the back end of that, you guys talked a little bit about the capping distributions on the private credit fund, which is a big deal because that is the kind of thing that you see turn into a contagion. It's very, very similar to what happened in 2008 with the housing bonds, but this is just, private credit there. And what really happens is people all of a sudden want to start taking out more than BlackRock is comfortable, giving out. They capped distributions to about 5% a quarter, and the distributions would have been, 10, 15%. So does that mean, and this is not just BlackRock, there was a number of private credit, facilitators here that were having funds withdrawn. So there's a couple reasons that could be. Obviously, one is just all of a sudden, people want to pull money out of the market, out of bonds, out of just about anything they can, and get away from the system. Or it could go even deeper, kind of to what we were just speaking about, or what I was just saying there, which is that there could be some insight that BlackRock is being, rolled out, or to some degree. Again, to what degree, who knows? But there could be some people in the know that are pulling money out in regards to that. So I think it is a big deal, and I think the contagion aspect is just one final piece I want to touch on a little more. Is if all of a sudden people are pulling money out of private credit at numbers we haven't really ever seen, it reminds me of 2008, because we saw that with people that were trying to sell those housing bond tranches here initially. And at first people thought, oh, wow, that's a crazy thing to do because those are so valuable. Everyone wants that. Everyone loves those. But people were starting to get out. And it was kind of just a news topic, as this was. It didn't really shape market sentiment. It was just an article that you would have seen, several months before the major sell-offs there. And then, of course, it grew and it grew and it grew, and it was more than meets the eye. So I think this is something that people should absolutely keep their eyes on, because this could be one of those moments that we look back on, 3 months down the road and say, oh my gosh, we had the playbook. It was right in front of us. Big players were moving big amounts of money very quickly, and we just took that as, news that kind of passed by the wayside. Granted, there's a lot of news to talk about, so, it's easy to miss these things. But from a financial perspective, I think those are the kind of things that we have to be paying attention to, because they can signal much larger seismic activity in the market.
Yeah, so there's a lot. Again, I keep having that vision of that snowball uh, picking up momentum going down this hill, and you referring to that as the contagion as well. It's a big problem
Right.
brewing and occurring. Let's bring back Will Barney, if he's still with us here, to join the
Yeah.
discussion. There he is. Thank you, Will. Um, I'd like to, we'll start with Will, we'll go back, and then we'll go to Bill. You mentioned before, Will, the minerals, uh, silver being put on the minerals list of scarce assets and such, and
Strategic
meetings and
minerals.
stuff
Yeah.
that have, strategic minerals and meetings that have taken place concerning this. Uh, right now, silver, rounding it up just a tad, closed at about $76 an ounce. Uh, Rounding it up just a tad, gold closed at about $4,900 an ounce. These are pretty significant pullbacks in the last day or so. With all the mechanics that you laid out, Will and Bill, Will, what do you think? Well, are we hit the? I know official floors haven't been named or set yet, but do you think we're going to go lower on gold and silver during this period of time where the banks are running out of schemes, before silver and gold explode to the levels that almost everyone agrees that it's heading in? What's your take on that, Will? Are we going to see
It
some more fall?
uh, I have a hard time seeing us get below $70 as a floor, even with the gyrations that are going on with the paper manipulations. They're still unloading shorts, okay, and you would think that, okay, if the price drops and they can get out of these contracts, everything is great and they're all going to be fine, and you might think that's okay. But the problem is at the same time, when the other side of your bank is taking delivery of silver at the exact same time, this isn't a normal trading game, because typically the paper market is traded every day and nobody really intends to take delivery. They're just trading on price. But when you have 41 million ounces take delivery in 2.5 weeks, that is unheard of. It's actually historic, never been done in history before, what we've seen the last 2.5 weeks. If you look at the entire history of the COMEX. Is that normal? No, it's not normal. Does that mean that we're done with these manipulations? No, I don't think so. But you better be getting ready. What's interesting is every time they pull this price down to try to unload a short, people that are looking for real silver, they just start buying the dip again because they know where
Hmm.
this is going. If we go to a price
Yes.
floor that actually makes it stable to be for miners to be in the silver game again, we're looking at, we could see $280, $300 an ounce silver in a stabilized economy. So we're way out of balance. We're already at, I think today we were running at 60-1 ratios, and we should be more like 20-1 or less. So I think we've got a ways to get stabilized there. And all of this shouldn't be a surprise to people. But if you've watched the drain of the COMEX inventory over the last 5-6 months, it's
Hmm.
freaking scary on a physical delivery basis.
Just a quick comment. We'll have Bill weigh in. Will, you've been in banking in your former life. Um, they got to be absolutely panicking right now. I mean, they're caught with their pants down at this point. And I mean, talk a little bit about the sentiment. They've got no way out.
They don't know how they're getting out of this. And the problem is it isn't just municipals that are big into debt. Everybody's big into debt. The banks are big into debt. The credit cards are at all-time highs. There's over $1 trillion of credit card debt in the United States. Unbelievable number. Okay. As of right now, it's at all-time high. It's never been this high. So we have this, and in a debt-based system, that happens though. You think about this. I mean, it can only go one way. If you have to create more debt in order to create any money in the system, it's not like you can just mine a little more gold or silver and create more money. No, you actually have to create a debt every time you do this. The debt levels just go up and up and up. And eventually it becomes so heavy, it just collapses onto itself.
Mhm.
Now
Mhm.
we're getting at that point where the weight is so heavy, we don't know if we can hold it up much longer, right?
Mhm.
And it's affecting
Yep.
everybody. It's that you're going to see a similar thing in just corporate bonds as well, where debt levels are at all-time high. And so we're at a very interesting position, and that's why probably people are calling Bill so much, is because they're fleeing to anything of safety. Gold and
Mhm.
silver, if you look at back at historic numbers and as we looked at wealth management and stuff within the banks that I worked at, is very interesting because typically they would tell people, oh, you should be 5 to 10% in metals just as a hedge, right? Just so
Right.
you have a little bit of protection there. But when you have Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley and others talking about their clients
Goldman.
need to be 30% plus into metals right now, that guys, we can't ignore this. This means they know massive correction is coming, and the only thing that's ever remained stable from one failing system into a new one has always
Right.
been metals. That's been the one thing that carried over and that sustained people through that transition. And so I don't think it's any different this time around.
Thank you very much, Will. Bill, I just will pedal back for a moment and comment certainly on anything you choose, sir. But the floor of silver and gold, perhaps, but
Mhm.
silver's there's light shining on that for the reasons we've come to learn with the shorts. Where do you see silver potentially going during this very interesting predicament that the banks find themselves in? And what time
Yeah.
frame? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I was going to say, so, one thing I would point out too is there's certainly a lot of money that has flown into oil just in the very, very immediate moment here, which I don't believe that this will be a tremendously long affair with Iran. So, that will, oil prices will come back down, to respond to that, fairly soon. And
Mhm.
but you look at, I mean, literally billions and billions and billions of dollars. Oil's up 50% in the last month or so. So, and that some of that is people that are chasing the thing that is growing tremendously. I mean, obviously that was gold and silver. It has been for the last year plus. In the last month, it's been oil. I mean, the last 6 months, the market's done nothing. It's flat or slightly down in the last 6 months. So there's certainly some of that, I think. And if you're looking at this broadly, when we talk about, what is the floor here and whatnot, we're really, if we call it within $2, let's say it gets down to 70 or 72 or $73, it's really, you're almost, to try and time that, because I'll talk to people and say, oh, we think it might go down a couple dollars. I mean, maybe, but we're talking about really bending over and getting this at maybe $2 cheaper an ounce on silver when we talk about the return on that being from, $72 to, $250, $300. So the difference between getting it at 72 or 77, when,
Point.
I really want to get 72, but then you miss that first jump, that immediate jump. People saw how quickly it moved in January. And that's absolutely how it will respond again in the future. So I always just caution people that trying to, to look at it in terms of, I want to get I want to call the bottom, so to speak, is almost short-sighted, because again, if you look at the context of what this is going to do, you really aren't kicking yourself for getting it $2 to $5 cheaper, if the alternative is potentially missing that meteoric move upward. So I do want to frame with that. But I would agree somewhere in that $70 to $72 range is probably the floor here. And gold, around 4,800 is probably the floor there. I think a lot of it does have to do, again, with, at least on the technical trading side of things, which influences the price to a very minor degree. But the things that are going to move the price of metals to the levels we've seen and levels we come to expect as of late are systemic things, are major, massive issues that have not changed last month to this month. It won't change. They're only getting worse, right? So so I would just point to all of that is, if we're looking at the small interim changes here, that can be driven by a lot of different factors, but none of which should really concern someone that is looking at this as a long-term investment, because they're really minute in comparison. So that's my thoughts there.
Thank you. Yeah, good point on $2 here or there when it's going to 230. To our audience, you got to go watch The Big Short in case you missed it. I don't know. I'm been around a long time. That movie probably 15 years old already. I don't recall, but well, no, 2008-ish, right? So yeah, whatever. The Big Short. Go check out that movie. That'll give you some insights. Film is a great medium for us to, to have a mental and emotional impact and understanding of things if a film is scripted right and done right. That was a very good film that will tell you what went on behind the scenes of the last orchestrated collapse under Bush and Hank Paulson. And we have similar mechanics, as Will talked about, taking place today. So it's a great film. I recommend The Big Short. It's got a stack of A-lister Hollywoods for whatever that's worth, because they're probably on the Epstein list. I'm not sure, but you get my drift. But anyway, it's a good script. I would recommend everyone check out The Big Short. It'll help connect the dots on what Bill and Will are discussing here. I want to talk about Josh Reed, a popular podcaster. He was one of our show hosts at American Media Periscope. I've met Josh personally. We've broke bread together at a Christmas event I hosted in Tampa, Florida. Great steakhouse there called Burns Steakhouse, a famous place. Great experience. Overpriced, but incredible food. Anyway, Josh Reed, I just interviewed Josh yesterday. We published it yesterday. It was a special broadcast done on Zoom. It's up on the platforms right now. And Josh is pretty well schooled in a lot of the areas that we're discussing and more. And I asked him, what his views were about the stock market, the stock, bond, and real estate market. We'll lump that together as the market. Those are your main markets: stocks, bonds, and real estate. And I asked Josh what he thought if the markets were going to collapse, because you have a lot of folks, in analysts, economists, people in the know that feel we're going to have a major correction in the stock, bond, and real estate area. Now, we've discussed the bonds here to some extent, and we can see a foregone conclusion there. We know the answer. It's collapsing, and we got a big problem coming. But stocks, bonds, and real estate. Now, Juan O'Savin's on the record, and I want to put it into context. When Juan said Dow could go to 60,000, he didn't say it was going to, and he did, and his point was, and it may, and I think it will at some point. His point, as I interpreted it, was the elephant in the room isn't necessarily keeping our eyes on the marked value of the stock market. He was pointing our attention on the collapsing of the dollar and the bond market and the other issues as the elephant in the room. But having said that, this is a setup for a long-winded setup for a question for each of you. We'll go to Bill first. What's your sentiments on stock, bond, and real estate collapse? We already discussed the bonds. So stocks, will the stock market, a lot of analysts say it is going to collapse. Josh Reed's on the record stating he believes it's a foregone conclusion, while others say maybe not. No one has a crystal ball, but what's your take on that, Bill Armour? Do you foresee a stock market and real estate correction that is going to parallel to some extent the bond correction that's just begun?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I would say, and there's a number of different things. Part of the issue with what we face economically right now is that we look at historic recessions and we can point to one identifiable reason, one thing that happened or occurred that drove that particular recession. This, where we find ourselves now, is so unique because we can point to so many different things. We can point to, I mean, I talk about sometimes with people that GDP growth, the only GDP growth that we've had in the last 12 months is AI capital expenditure, is building out data centers and whatnot. And so what if, and built into all of that spending, that AI spending there, is the understanding that that's going to return multiples. And if all of a sudden, companies aren't able to leverage AI in the way that they think, they stop that capital expenditure, they don't spend that, and then all of a sudden you have zero GDP growth. So, I mean, you could point to valuations on companies at record numbers, at numbers we haven't seen since the 20s. You could point to, kind of the connectedness of the bond market, the stock market, and the real estate market all in tandem there, and the overvaluations in each of those. So it's hard because it's not just one thing. And of course, quick caveat here, this is to say nothing of the general financial system, the banking cabal, the dollar, et cetera, the Fed note system. That's to say nothing of that. That's just speaking, kind of in the system as it is, that there is a necessary correction or implosion that occurs here. And so I don't think it's any one thing. And that's what I think a lot of people misunderstand is, we're waiting for that one domino to fall. There's 100 dominoes, and all of them will knock over the one next to them. So, that's why I'm so critical when I see something like the capping withdrawals here from the private credit institutions. Is, to me, that is just one of a billion other dominoes we could point to that may start that collapse. And I think that term contagion is such a great word for this, because it is at the epicenter of what then spreads and onto the next thing, onto the next thing, onto the next thing. And so if we just see one of those go, that's where you see this rampant implosion. And so for people, what that means is they have to be so proactive in a way that they've really never had to be. Historically, you could watch the market descending and you could make choices, and you took a little haircut while you got that process. But I think that we're going to see an accelerated effect, that it's almost like there's so much gasoline here that when it does finally occur, it will be explosive. And so I would just warn people that this is a time to be proactive and not reactive.
The contagion thing brings me back. We've been talking about COVID with Benjamin Hart, the attorney, and then Will Barney invoked COVID as related to the banking issue. And so here I'll do the same thing. It's a common theme here. You talk about the contagion. Well, we had all the scams and pandemic aspect of all the lies that were told to us by Fauci and company. But here you do have a real pandemic of contagion, because it's not, as you just aptly stated, Bill, one issue. They are all interconnected to one extent or another. Will, what's your comment on your sentiment of the stock market collapsing?
I think what we're watching here is a common theme of risk fleeing to assets. It's moving in a direction where people are trying to backstop what they're doing. Even the money that was trying to be pulled out of BlackRock was because they were trying to put it to some place where it wouldn't be a risk. Okay.
Mhm.
And when they're capping the amount of withdrawals, it means they're worried about how many people are pulling out all at once. So contagion is a scary thing, and fear tends to never play too well for anybody's advantage. Almost never does it play too well.
Correct.
So
Correct.
ultimately, you don't want to be acting in fear. You always want to be acting out in a proactive manner, like Bill said. You want to be working towards stabilizing yourself, regardless of which way it goes. You know, gold and silver historically are not great earners. They haven't been. They've been a stable, you know, something that just kind of held its ground, but it wasn't really a great earner. Nobody really wanted it as much of a way to grow a pension fund or something like that, because you couldn't count on it for that. But when you wanted to protect your assets, there was nothing better, right? Because it
Yes.
may not go up much, but it certainly doesn't go down much. In a current environment like this, where assets become more and more valuable, I think the likelihood of a downgrade becomes even very slim at this point, because all the direction seems to be pointing upward. Because what we'll see going forward is everybody's going to be fleeing risk and fleeing to stability. And that bodes well for things like metal. It bodes well for things like real estate that tend to stand the test of time. So we saw that over the last 5 years, even as we saw major companies put billions and billions of dollars into individual homes. That was a move to put money into stability. And now they're being told they got to get rid of all their portfolio, because those are for people, not for corporations. Right? So now they're going to have
Yes.
to
Yes.
move to something else. And what are they going to move toward? They're going to probably move towards metal. So, because they've got to have something of stability. So I think for all of you listening out there, of course, this isn't financial advice. We can't give that to you in a forum like this. We're just talking about the issues of our day. And anytime you have a system that begins to collapse, your choices of what you can hold on to through that collapse become very limited. Land, gold, silver, they tend to survive changes,
Yep.
but other things that are not as stable tend to struggle. And so I would say choose wisely, be proactive, set a plan for yourself, do something that you can do honestly. Do not use debt for investments. Don't ever do that, because that'll only get you into trouble. But be wise, and you'll probably come out on the other side of this very well.
Thank you. Well, a quick comment I'd like to make is 40,000-foot view. Of course, what we have here is the collapse of a financial system from top to bottom, not just here in America, but throughout this world. And thank goodness for that, as crazy as that statement sounds. At the same time, and thank goodness for this, you have a parallel system that the great minds in this world, for the betterment of mankind, is developed and ready to go and being tested. And that's why this show is called the Global Financial Reset. That's what we're doing. So, as Will stated, and Bill as well, fear. Maybe we'll get into some biblical principles with Will and Bill in a moment. There's no place for that. Positive proactivity. Knowledge is power. Applied knowledge is wisdom. It's very simple. In fact, you can be high-fiving through this nightmare. But I want to pedal backwards to what you said, Bill, Will, a moment ago. We'll start with Bill and we'll go to Will. But you mentioned, Will, a moment ago about the bank's model of 5 to 15% allocation into precious metals, which has been their sort of standing mantra over the decades. We're talking about the central banks and the Wall Street bank systems. And of course, they would direct you into the paper proxy of that. We covered that last time you gentlemen were on. But where I'd like to go with it this time is, so now, as you stated, Will, they're on the records going, you better put 30% of your portfolio model into precious metals. And of course, again, refer to 2 weeks program, folks. You'll find out why we're talking tangible versus paper. Otherwise, it's the fire into the frying pan. But where I'm going with with it this week is to Bill is based on what we to our audience, based on what you've been listening to, based on what Will and Bill have been discussing and analyzing and peeling the curtain back for us. It's complicated stuff, and they've done a great job giving it to us in a simplified way that we can understand it. And again, I recommend The Big Short. The film can help you with this quite a bit. But my question, Bill, is simply this: is 30% enough, based on the extraordinary circumstances, unprecedented globally, that we are experiencing right now at the top of that mountain, that snowball that's getting going? Is 30% enough? And I realize every case is different. Every person's in a different situation. Again, to Will's point, not specific investment advice, but broadly speaking, if the banks have, in my opinion, 5 to 15% has always been under what it should have been. Now they're at 30%. Where do you feel they should be?
Yeah, great question. I would start with just kind of an analogy here, and that is, if you were insuring your home and someone said, most people insure, 5 to 15, maybe even 30% of their home. How much would you like to insure? I think the immediate question would be, well, do I not just insure the whole thing? And you know,
I'm
and,
going
and
to
you know,
insure
to
my garage.
Right, exactly. Just the living room. So, and I would pose that question to someone listening as well, is when you look at the danger that is being posed, it's like if you have fires around your home every single day, and they're like, well, it really makes sense to insure, your garage or your living room. That's all most people do. That's fine. If most people only want to insure their living room, that's their job, or that's their prerogative. But personally, I would like, my portfolio to be insured. And metals is and I agree so heavily with Will on this, it's the bunker, right? It's where you go to kind of save yourself from the bombs are going off, bullets are whizzing past your head. You go to the bunker. And one of the beautiful things about metals is no one's forcing. It's not like some contract you have to be in metals for some amount of time and you can't leave. You can enter into metals, and at any point, the bombs stop dropping, things look comfortable, you can always leave metals. The problem is that once you've taken a bullet, you can't get that bullet out, right? So you always want to be early and maybe overprotective than be late and have underinsured, so to speak. So that would be not to say any particular number or anything like that, but just to say when you really think about that question, I think that question itself of how much should I have in metals really misunderstands what it is. It's insuring yourself, and everyone's different. Risk tolerance is different. I completely understand that. Some people say, I'm 25. If I lost it all, that's just fine. I can make it back. But someone that's 65 years old, you don't have the same ability to go out there and you take these big losses. The financial system changes, and perhaps you're not reimbursed in the way that we would anticipate, and all of a sudden you're really behind the eight ball. So I would just say, you'd always rather, I give the analogy with Noah's Ark there, is that if at any point Noah wanted to jump off the ark and go swimming, he certainly could have. But once the ark doors were closed, no one else was getting on that ark. So, that's my logic there. And with everything we've talked about, and all the things we didn't talk about, frankly, there's enough of a reason here to be a little safer than a little less safe.
Well said, and I love the analogies. Any quick feedback from you, Will, before I move us into the subject of cash?
Yeah, I just wanted to say on that topic, no one ever feels like when you're going through the collapse of a financial system, no one ever feels like they perfectly protected themselves in every way. Very few actually feel like they've gone all the way. Some have. Okay, let's be honest. There's a few, but that's a minority. However, I would say do what you can afford to do, and do not overextend yourself into something you can't afford to do. Stay within those rails, and it'll serve you well.
Excellent. Thank you. And to our viewers, I'm going to conclude this broadcast, not just yet, but when we do, with 3 very specific action items across that will address the issues at hand. Let's put it like that. But let me say this. Talk about cash. The expression "cash is king." I've used it a million times in my life. particularly in certain venues that require you to scan. And I say, hey, cash is king. Of course, here, some places, by the way, I don't know what's going on in America these days because my boots haven't been on that soil in 3 years. I'm doing everything I can to help it from this perch, and I've been coming to Asia for on and off for over 12 years. But like, for example, there's a Starbucks here, uh, actually at the hospital that I unfortunately had to frequent for a bit of time here. Um, they will only accept a scan. You know, it's interesting, but that's not where I was going. Cash is king is pretty much an expression we've all used, we all know about, we understand the meaning behind that. Um, so, but cash is trash today, in my opinion, because even though the dollar spiked up, I checked it this morning, 100 on the dollar index. All things indicate, and if you differ, Bill or Will, please interrupt me, that the dollar is going to ultimately plummet down, which we've talked about quite a bit on this show. So cash is king doesn't really stand today, in my opinion, because of the attack it's under and inflation as it's been for the last 100 some odd years. So um, while you have to have some cash for emergencies and opportunities, whatever cash we're working with, presently it's the Federal Reserve's note, but we know that's changing, which is why, in my opinion, during that change, we're in a danger zone. Therefore, cash isn't king. Having stated that, uh, is there anything else besides physical, tangible, bullion, gold, and/or silver that either of you would steer uh, this discussion in, since cash maybe not isn't king? Uh, any comments about that? I mean, Will and Bill. We'll go with Bill. Anything else
Yeah,
other than gold and silver? Yeah.
yeah. And my answer may be different than Will's on this, but my thought
Mhm.
process is sometimes you don't have to overcomplicate. There may absolutely be things that make tremendous sense right now, particularly in the crypto space, and that's obviously not particularly my area of expertise. But what I would argue is, we don't always not everything needs to be overcomplicated. We're looking at something with gold and silver that has done its job and done its job perfectly for 4,000 years. And so I look at that and I say, I don't really think that I need necessarily to try these alternatives when I've got something that has a proven track record, thousands and thousands of years of a proven track record at handling exactly the moment we find ourselves now, which is in a currency transition, which is not a new event. This is something that's happened, dozens and dozens of times throughout history. So, and we've seen gold perform through each one of those and perform splendidly. So, to my sentiment on that is there things that could perform as well or maybe even better? In a perfect world, perhaps. But when I look at sort of the track record on this, I just think I don't know that I necessarily need to in a sense, gamble with the alternatives when gold has been so consistent, so reliable. And again, for most people, the goal here is to make it from point A to point B, this transition in one piece. And so why not take old reliable in that sense? Now, there might be a brand
Mhm.
new car that could be great, but you've never driven it and you've never really read the reviews on it and this and that. So I stick to old reliable in that way. And obviously you need some cash, for short-term liquidity. I get that, but there's a difference between short-term liquidity from long-term safety. And that's kind of how I would separate it, because cash, and we all know where that's going, but is only as safe as the current regime, the central banks, the purchasing power behind it. And so that's kind of the differentiator that I would point out here.
Great point. Look, all roads lead to gold and silver as a safe haven right now. I was just looking, and we'll ask Will the same question: is there something comparable or better for rather than holding an abundance of cash, which we know is dangerous? Any contributions to that, Will?
No one wants to be in the situation that Germany found itself in at the end of World War II, where barrels of cash couldn't even hardly buy them anything or even toilet paper. No one wants to be in that scenario. The thing that's important is if you get to a point where the value of a currency begins to implode rapidly, as we've seen many other countries exhibit this Zimbabwe is a good example. Over many years, where their currency was just imploding massively. The most important things to people that are in that situation is, do I have what I need to get through the crisis? So there's going to be some situations where you can't eat gold and you can't eat silver, but maybe you need to stock food because that's something you don't have enough of. So I think you need to take a look at your own individual assessment of situation and say, okay, do I have something set aside that I could get through a rough period for a little bit of time? Do I have the goods that I need right now? And go ahead and make those investments now, so that you have what you need to get through a rough patch, because nothing is perfect, and we're in a very imperfect world, and there's no change of financial system that has ever come without turbulence or earthquakes, as some would say, through the process. And I think that those are what we have to keep in mind, is that we're in a situation where we're in a point of transition. So do what you can afford. Don't overextend yourself. And if you need to be putting some of your resources towards physical items such as food, shelter, or clothing, do that. Take care of yourself. It's going to be vitally important. Of course, when you have extra and you've got your investments to put somewhere, there's always gold and silver, and you should be able to access that in most countries. Even today, even with the challenges, it's still available in most places. The United States is dealing with a liquidity crisis when it comes to physical silver, but most of the other metals are not very short supply. There's plenty of it. So even though silver's getting a squeeze at the moment in terms of inventories, there's still plenty available. You're looking at you might find it at your local pawn shop. You might find your local dealer. You might call Bill and he'll get you all set up. But ultimately, we need to be smart about how we deal with this. And, because if things go south in a negative way and you're trying to figure out how you're just going to get goods and services, that may be a higher priority to you than another ounce of silver. And so that's what you're going to have to look at is, do I have what I need? And a lot of people say, oh, you're just another prepper. Well, preppers are usually never sorry. They're usually always happy that they prepped because they always have what they need. And so, you can joke about it all you want, but when things get difficult, if let's say that there is a major issue where perhaps credit cards or whatever are turned off for a brief period of time, and it may not be a long time, but maybe it is a brief period of time. What do you do in that situation? And when it comes to cash, even though cash may have the opportunity to be convertible to a new currency at the appropriate time, it's only going to be as safe as the place where it is held. So how safe is your bank? How are they going to handle a weathered storm? What kind of derivatives overhead are they looking at? And at one
That's a
point,
whole nother conversation.
you have massive derivative exposure on some of these very big banks, and there's already banking legislation on the books that says the banks can pay their buddies derivative exposure, their other banks, all of what they owe them before they can pay a depositor. So that leaves the depositor in the last position, which is not a good place to be. So again, cash may be king in some circles, but how valuable is the place where it's held? Is that able to survive a tsunami? Those are the questions everybody has to answer for themselves. Hope that helps.
Great. Helps quite a bit. Great information. Thank you, Will. We're going to wrap up this broadcast with 3 action items. I'll conclude once Bill and Will have vacated the premises with very specific 10 modules. I will give you a synopsis of each of them. But before we do, let's start with Will. Concerning business, these are action items as a result of all the information we've just learned in this broadcast, as we do every week in this show. And we approach it from many different angles. There's so much going on. But concerning businesses, business ventures, humanitarian projects and efforts, what is the best way for people to learn about your services and perhaps connect up with you, Will, as an item of action for those looking to for business and humanitarian projects that they're getting ready to launch?
Well, I have made myself available on a limited basis for some consulting appointments. The calendar is limited, so you'll have to go to our website, enochgs, enochgs.com. You can see it there on your screen. And towards the bottom of, I believe it's the first page, but towards the bottom, there is a link where you can look at that calendar and see what my availability is for a limited time. And we're doing this to help people because there's a lot of people that are struggling right now. I am opening up these appointments, not just for the typical price that you would have to pay to reach someone like me, but we're actually offering that for the price of a donation to the Foundation for Humanitarian Projects. This might make it accessible to some of you that otherwise could never afford it. I don't know how long we're going to keep that going. We started it just before Christmas. It's likely we might keep it through Easter. So take the time now while you can if you want to get an appointment with me. Otherwise, you can find out more information about projects at enochgs.com, and we're happy to help each of you to have a successful future and do great things for the world.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Will Barney. You're such a valued guest here, and I appreciate all your contribution, knowledge, and input for all of us. Takes me to Bill Armour in terms of action items. How can people reach out to you, Bill, for a free consultation and assistance in acquiring gold and silver? And then briefly talk about your team's assistance with regards to those that may require assistance with liquidations or asset transfers and rollovers and such. Uh, Action item, folks. Take it away, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way is going to be that phone number right there. That comes directly to me, that 310-407-0239. That comes directly to me. So first thing we'll do is talk about your situation. How are you set up? What could a possible solution look like for you? Again, to bridge from where we are to where we need to be. So that's step one, and then we can look at 401ks, IRAs, cash savings, fiat savings, whatever that might look like. But how do we make sure that we're securing that in the meantime? So step one is identifying, what the outcome might be or how we might achieve that. And then step two, and I'm glad you brought this up, is we have a dedicated team here that will assist with the entire process. That's an asset transfer team. They will assist, A to Z, and they're very diligent. It's one thing I really pride our team on, is the fact that they're dotting I's, they're crossing T's, because this is a big change. A lot of people are, particularly you talk about qualified funds, the IRS can be very unforgiving in this process. And so making sure that you have a reliable team that is accomplishing this process, not picking up fees, not picking up penalties, is such a huge benefit. And one thing I would say that separates, our firm from so many others out there is this team that does care so deeply and does understand really the nuance of all of this. So they'll assist with that transition, everything from that liquidation of the funds, from stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all of the things we've talked about that have tremendous issues facing them in the meantime, all the way to the movement of the funds and the purchasing the metals, obviously, that I would assist anyone that reaches out with. So reach out to that number, that 310-407-0239. That'll be me. I'll get right back to you just as soon as I'm available, if I'm on the other line, obviously, and then we can assess your situation.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So there's an action item. I want to mention this before we sign our guests off, and thank you both very much for being here. There's a book written probably 100 years ago by the author George S. Clason, as I recall. You could probably read it in a day or two. It's a small paperback, I don't know, 100 pages. But chock full of inspiration and great wisdom. And the book is called The Richest Man in Babylon. I absolutely recommend, in light of what we've just discussed, in keeping it simple, Sam, calming down in the midst of the storm, this book will also guide you and help you through that. George S. Clason, you can pick it up anywhere, probably online. Richest Man in Babylon. Better a little, to Will's point earlier and Bill's, better a little caution than a great regret. Those that laugh at the preppers, better a little caution than a great regret. We cannot afford to be without adequate protection when a storm hits. And believe me, folks, the storm is hitting. The storm is upon us. And again, we can be high-fiving through it and waiting to come on the other side of it and help those that need help and start launching us into the golden age. So thank you, Will Barney and Bill Armour, very much for joining us. To my producer, let's talk about the Wealth Coach University. This is action item number 3. Wealthcoachuniversity.com. You can visit this platform. Let's go to the next image. Wealth Coach, there it is. Okay, you see on the screen, folks, and by the way, the premise of this book, Global Financial Reset, you can see, quick read, under 100 pages. It's really lays the groundwork of what we're in the middle of and walks you through the 10 modules you see here in detail. Module 1, these are free, wealthcoachuniversity.com. These are videos I produced that can range anywhere from 3 to 30 minutes each. 1 is orientation. 2 is GOOTS, get out of the system. How we do that to survive and thrive this financial transition. Number 3, very important, understanding precious metals, the buyer beware aspect of it, as well as the fundamentals. Number 4, and we'll have Brandon Clark on next week from Triad Retire to help those in retirement looking for guaranteed income. We discussed that in Module 4. Module 5 is crypto. I leaned on Josh Reed for that, and Josh Reed delivers Module number 5. This is all free education. I absolutely encourage you to spend some time and go through these modules. Number 6, healthy living. Very important. You don't have your health, you have nothing. And we've all experienced that. So take a look at Module 6. I invoke some of my doctor friends, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Doctors Mark and Michelle Sherwood, some interesting points in healthy living. Number 7 is preparedness. Will Barney touched on that. Preparedness is very important. We cover that at various degrees, peripherally, the next level, intermediate ways to prepare. Again, all this is in the scope of get out of the system to the best of our ability during this transition. Number 8 is faith. Ground yourself in faith. We touch on that briefly in module number 8. Number 9 is action. You've got to take action, and that leads you to number 10, the last final action item, and then I'm going to bring an important announcement up about Ricardo Bosi in just a minute. Module number 10, let's go to the next screenshot to my producer, gives you access to meet with me privately, one-on-one, on a Zoom call, video Zoom call. If you don't want to be seen on screen, audio works for me as well, but I will be there for you. You can secure an appointment with me by visiting wealthcoachuniversity.com. There's a mechanism with which to secure time to meet with me. Again, I'm a recovering financial advisor. I left the industry, of course, in perfect standing from all regulatory bodies. I was a financial advisor for nearly 15 years with 6 independent offices in 3 states. My biography is available for you at jmcbroadcasting.com. Click on my name. But bottom line is I have limited, as Will does too for his area of expertise, I have limited appointments. 8 a month is all I can do, and that's pushing the envelope for me. I've had quite a few appointments over the last 6 or 8 months that I've launched this. If you need assistance because you have a lot going on, these are for folks with portfolios and a few brokerage accounts and pensions and IRAs and income. You've got a lot going on and want some assistance in navigating the minefield to goots, get out of the system. I'm available not for investment advice. I don't sell anything. I don't manage money, but I am there as a consultant and a coach to help you through that. And then I'll refer you to my resource network, people like Brandon and Bill and others. So please avail yourself to the free modules at wealthcoachuniversity.com. Here's an important announcement concerning Ricardo Bosi, and I'll be right back.
His commentary and analysis is among the best, bar none. His words serve as a masterclass. He deconstructs the deceptions of the PSYOP war. He is the author of The Greatness Awaits You, the national leader of Australia One Party Incorporated, a monthly panel participant in JMC's Global Defense War, in a league of his own, an international treasure, a follower of Jesus Christ. He is Ricardo Bossi. Ricardo Bossi is a published author and speaker, international business consultant, former Australian Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel, having served 24 years in the Australian Army, including postings to the Special Air Service Regiment, the 1st Commando Regiment, Headquarters Special Operations, and the U.S. Combined Joint Task Force Headquarters in Kuwait. Don't miss JMC Broadcasting's Bossi Briefs, where John sits down with Ricardo, helping to connect the dots, making sense of the madness, keeping us all grounded and united as the battle between good and evil play out before our very eyes. Join John and Ricardo every other Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here at jmcbroadcasting.com.
And the current Bossi Briefs was just published a couple of days ago. You can find that by going to our website, hit follow, and friend us on Facebook and X and YouTube and our 2 Rumble channels. And you can always watch them on our website, jmcbroadcasting.com. Also, Ricardo Bossi is a panel member from day one last year when we launched the Global Defense War Military Panel. This month, we have Derek Johnson, Ricardo Bossi, Michael Jaco, retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox, and we have joining for the first time the Global Defense War panel. Our good friend here at the Global Financial Reset broadcast is Rob Cunningham. So that's a powerful panel of military and intelligence experts. You don't want to miss that. So sign up for free subscription at jmcbroadcasting.com to remain informed, empowered, and connected for our lean and mean military, economic, and intelligence reporting. Now, the announcement you see on the screen, join us Thursday, March 26th, 8 p.m. Derek Johnson will be on screen for 1 hour. I'll be your host on screen to answer your questions. And while we're discussing Derek Johnson, I just did a special broadcast with Derek. Both he and I tend to be long-winded. So it's a 2-hour plus episode, but worth every minute of it. Of course, you can pause it anywhere. Just published yesterday. Special broadcast, JMC Broadcasting. Derek Johnson and I sat down and hammered out a lot of key issues that are happening right now in the MAGA movement that you'll want to listen to. So that's really going to be a wrap. To my producer, we'll just end the broadcast. Again, thank you. I direct everyone's attention to the screen. Joining us next week is Brandon Clark, triadretire.com, to discuss income strategies, safety with retirement planning strategies. Brandon Clark will join us next week to cover income assets for you. And we have Patriot Street Fighter Scott McKay, my good friend Scott McKay. By the way, he just interviewed me on his popular Monday night broadcast. It's been published up on his platform. We'll be publishing it on ours within the next 24 to 48 hours. It's gotten over 50,000 views on Scott's platform. We spent 2.5 hours in a very unleashed, candid conversation. We were so transparent and candid. I think we both forgot that we were recording the episode. So you'll want to check it out. A lot was discussed, just Scott and I for 2.5 hours. And we'll be publishing that at JMC Broadcasting very, very soon for you to view as well. Join us next week. Scott McKay will be here to weigh in on the issues relating to the global financial reset, and Brandon Clark as an action item and education to provide guaranteed income strategies for you, including an 8% return under certain circumstances. So you'll want to join us next week. Again, another action item, pick up a copy of my book, Lean and Mean Quick, another way for you to be prepared for the global financial reset that is happening right now. That's a wrap. Not a very smooth flowing show. Fish rots from the head down. The show is as successful as it can be from the host on down. But I hope we've provided some great value for you here in this broadcast. I want to thank you very much for following our work at JMC Broadcasting, for our exponential growth that we're now experiencing. Thank you for sharing our broadcast. Where we go one, we go all. Stay safe, everyone, and may God be with you.
Many financial advisors are good people trapped in a covert and corrupt system, but it's all they know and it's their job. They too have a mortgage to meet and a lifestyle to maintain. Many are well-intended, many are not. Where is your financial advisor at? The Advisor Scorecard may help you. Does your financial advisor have the same ideology and political view as you? Does your financial advisor understand and follow fiscal, monetary, and changing policy? Is your financial advisor in good standing with the regulatory bodies? Gold and silver is the best performing asset class in the world. Have they discussed acquiring physical tangible metals to combat inflation? Is your financial advisor or firm woke? Is your advisor aware of the parallel economies and the global financial reset that is clearly underway? Do they have a strategy for this? Is your portfolio outpacing the current rate of inflation? Less diversification or trend is your friend. Has your advisor discussed this with you? Do you have adequate liquidity for emergencies and opportunities? Those preparing for or in retirement, does your income plan provide a guaranteed income you cannot outlive?
Hello, this is John Michael Chambers. When it comes to financial advisors, remember, they have many clients. You are your only client. Take a true assessment of your financial advisor by using the Advisor Scorecard, which can be found at wealthcoachuniversity.com. Times are changing. Go woke, go broke. Break free from not only the system, but those who cling to the edicts controlled by the system, and become the CEO of your financial life. Be sure to view the 10 free modules and schedule your Wealth Coach consult and gain access to a most valuable resource network of licensed Patriot professionals who think like you do and who understand the times in which we live and whom are experts in his or her respective fields. Changing times requires adjustments. We are here to help. And so, I'll see you over at wealthcoachuniversity.com. It's time.